Welcome to Men's Anonymous, the podcast where men can be vulnerable and open without fear of judgment. Your host, Daniel Weinberg, leads authentic and unfiltered discussions that explore the challenges and triumphs of modern manhood. Join us as we break down barriers, challenge stereotypes, and redefine masculinity. Men's Anonymous, a safe space for men to lower their shields and share their inner world without judgment.
Hi. On this week's show, we have the doc who takes us on a journey into the world of open relationships, polyamory, and what they call non-monogamous consensual relationships. Men's Anonymous. Doc, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daniel. Nice to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here. So for our audience, I just want to preface the doc, who's a good friend of mine, has been very kind to share his personal journey. And what we will do, we will omit all names of any participants in any of the stories. It's actually quite irrelevant. It's more about the stories themselves. So we will dive in. So Nick, where are you today?
I'm in Topanga, California.
Topanga, California.
Yeah.
And we are going to talk about your journey into what's often called open relationships, polyamory, and I got the other expression they use is consensual non-monogamy.
Yeah.
So you didn't start off there. Why don't you give us, you grew up, which part of the world did you grow up?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up right here in Los Angeles, in West Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of kind of typical nice family upbringing, private school, very privileged upbringing, and from a kind of nuclear family, and then child of divorce at 11. Ended up going away for college on the East Coast, and sort of kind of had a very very typical kind of privileged, well-to-do upbringing in LA.
You have a good relationship with both your mother and your father growing up?
Yeah, great relationship growing up, especially with my mother. My father and I, post-divorce, things got a little weird and complicated, but before that had a very solid relationship. Yeah.
And your relationship with them today?
Mom's one of my best friends, really awesome. We're super tight, and my dad as well. We're close, not as close as my mom. That's a long story and a lot of deep layers there. But they're both in LA, so I see them and still see them regularly. Yeah.
And you started off your relationship / romantic career, I guess, in high school. Had a high school sweetheart.
Yeah, for sure. High school, even junior high, things got even like fifth, sixth grade. There was, interest started. I had a I guess what you'd call a girlfriend in fifth or sixth grade, but nothing ever happened. It was just the label. Oh yeah, like we're dating.
My girlfriend.
And then yeah, I have a girlfriend. And then through junior high school, I had various endeavors, dating a few different girls, and then probably my first real girlfriend, I would say, was when I was in senior year of high school. I was like 17 and was like properly dating a girl. I had a proper girlfriend. Yeah.
And your typical relationship, I guess, were of a monogamous nature, or what were your relationships like? Did you have like long-term relationships, or were they like short, physical, move on, churn?
Yeah, totally. I think I was kind of all over the place. I've always like really enjoyed being in relationship and in a relationship dynamic. So I would sort of move from relationship to relationship, I guess what we call serial monogamy. And then interspersed when I was single, I would date and sort of have fun flings, things like that, and then end up in another relationship up, through my 20s and mid 30s. That was sort of my MO. Had some misadventures into cheating with one girlfriend in particular, and that was a whole experience learning about, God, how horrible that felt. And
You mean you carried
um
on? You mean you carried on a parallel
there-
relationship in?
not another relationship, but would hook up with other girls and was dishonest about it. And there was one relationship in particular where that was sort of happening. But for the most part, serial monogamous relationships up, through my mid 30s.
And what would you say were the trigger events that sort of led you to, let's say, opening the portal to something different?
Yeah. So, and my experience was that I was in these long-term relationships, a year, 2 years, I think in 2.5 years. And there was this feeling that I had where I would have one foot in, but one foot out. And I perceived this as some difficulty with commitment, or like I was like, what is this issue? I can't really commit. And they would feel it. And then there would be this tension of, they would want more in the relationship. And I was like, felt like I was unable to give my full self or my full heart or whatever it was. There was this tension that would develop. And at some point,
Is this
uh,
a repeated pattern that you found?
totally. It's
Right.
so then the relation so then there was some point where the relationship would fail. I would leave, or something would happen. And we'd break up. And then this pattern kept happening multiple times. And then there was one experience in particular that was like really impactful. Without going into too much detail, just for time's sake, I had a really traumatic breakup with a girlfriend at the time who really we thought we were going to get married. We were like, this is it. We're done. We're getting married. We're going to have kids. This is this is our
You guys
family.
are living in California, living
This is
together. Well,
this is back in New York. This is
oh,
back in New York. Yeah, when I was living in New York.
you're living
Weren't
together?
weren't
It was at
weren't
that
living
stage?
weren't formally living together, but we were, spending all our time together.
Hmm.
And we're planning on moving to Hawaii and having a whole, family and life in Hawaii together, sort of this very like nice, ideal, picturesque little lifestyle.
What sort of
And
age are you at that time?
so I was 33, and that relationship sort of came crumbling down.
Why?
It's a
Try
good
try
question.
try and put the pieces together as to
Yeah, yeah. So we had moved out to Hawaii. I guess I have to tell this story. So we had moved out to Hawaii. We went out to Hawaii to go sort of investigate, explore which island we wanted to live on. I had job interviews, got job offers, and
and
it
so
was
both
so
of
we were
you had
sort of,
never you're not from there, you've never lived there, and
yeah, we're
you
being
both
totally insane.
decided, "Let's
Yeah,
let's get married, and let's go
yeah.
make our life in Hawaii and have a really nice by the sea, nature."
Yes, kind of simple lifestyle, raise our kids in nature. And we were out there, and something just didn't feel right. And we kind of came back from that trip and decided we weren't going to move to Hawaii.
Hmm.
And then all of this other stuff probably that had been, present under the surface that we never dealt with, or I never really acknowledged or realized, all sort of bubbled up. We had this big breakup, and but then we had this pause. We were like, wait a minute, what just happened? We just had this grand plan. We're so in love. We had this great plan to go move out to Hawaii, have this family. you know Maybe we need to like take a beat and like, try to process what happened, and maybe we can still be together. And we weren't together. And in that time frame, I had gone on a vacation with some of my boys. And I had actually, it was over the holidays, and I had said to her, I want to spend the holidays with you. And she was like, well, I'm not quite ready to do that. And I was like, okay, I respect that. We're not quite there. So I ended up going on, I told her, I was like, I'm going to go on this trip with my boys and go on this trip. We go to Brazil. I have this great, amazing fling with this Brazilian girl while we're out there. Super, super fun. And come back, and she and I decide to get back together. And basically, typical story, like the iPhone syncs with the iPad. She sees the messages with the girl in Brazil. There's a huge blowout. She never speaks to me again, literally.
Ever to this day.
Ever. Yeah. Like, so still, and I was like that, and when this happened, she sent me a text message with photographs of, screenshots of my messages with this girl, and was like, you're horrible. I hate you. I never want to talk to you again. And, and that was super traumatic. But in the next, sort of 6 months following that, I was like, what? There's something that feels like there's something to dig into here, right? It's like, well, for me, this was a fling. It wasn't about love or, any potential long-term relationship I was going to have with this girl. And it had nothing to do with the way that I felt about Liz. I still totally love Liz and wanted to, potentially get back together with her and repair things. But for me, I was able to have this other experience. And for her, I realized there was a huge disparity in the way we thought about this experience that I had, right? For her, this was like, no fucking way. Like it's non-negotiable. And so I was like, wow, I started thinking about the difference between love and intimacy and sex, and how they're all different and they can overlap in different ways. And for me, this sexual experience and somewhat intimate experience really had nothing to do with the love and intimacy that I had with Liz. And I was like, wow, there's this big difference in the way we think about things. And there was no like concept of, open relationships or non-monogamy at that point. I just was like noticing the difference in the way we thought about things. And it wasn't until,
as well, just for the audience, is that
yeah,
open relationships are the agreement that one can have a physical relationship outside of the primary relationship, and being polyamorous or being in a polyamorous relationship is that you're allowed to have a more emotional, deeply connected relationship with another, including your primary. That I know it's all bespoke in terms of what you agree with your partner, but there is a distinction that is usually made between something being just a physical experience versus whether, you're permitted to be in a more deeply emotional connected relationship. Is that right? Or
yeah, I think that's pretty much how I understand it, sort of as a spectrum, sort of on the one hand, yeah, I would say, and I don't want to speak for everybody who's had these experiences or in this community, because I think everybody has slightly different definitions and understandings. But for me, it feels like there's a spectrum where, you can have some form of openness and freedom to have connections, sexual, physical connections with other people, maybe with your partner, maybe non-emotional relationships on the one hand, sort of like monogamish, I think is another term that's out there.
Yeah.
Where there's some flexibility. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I would say that's where I'd put polyamory, where you have real emotional relationships with other partners, sort of ongoing emotional relationships with more than one partner.
What happened with you post this? How did you actually even understand that there was an already proven concept or concepts or spectrum out there to even explore? What were your sources to go and, let's say, go down the rabbit hole of exploring this, or was it complete like self-discovery on your own? Let's work this out.
Well, so in the aftermath of this really traumatic breakup, it was awful, really painful. In the aftermath, I ended up having my first ayahuasca journey, and there was a big heart opening that happened during that experience that was really pivotal. Still not really thinking about relationship, but really opened my heart a lot. And then subsequently, I had a really good friend in medical school, and she had told me she was dating a guy who was in an open marriage. And she was a good friend.
He was married, and
She was dating, yeah, she was dating a guy in an open marriage. And my first reaction was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like that's insane. I'm like very protective over her, right? And then I ended up getting invited to a cocktail party that the husband and wife threw for my friend who was their girlfriend.
When you say their girlfriend, was it his relationship with her, or
It was his girl. It was his girlfriend, but it was all out in the open, consensual with the wife. Nothing was hidden. And they threw a cocktail party for her PhD. She had just completed her PhD. And so I get invited. I go to the cocktail party, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And then I'm sort of seeing all of them interact, and I'm having conversations with the husband and the wife, and it's just seeing the vibe and feeling that there was just so much love there. And I was like, wow, this is totally not what I expect to experience here. And somewhere, I don't recall exactly after that, like how far after that, but at some point there was like a little light bulb that went off for me that was like, oh, I wonder if one of the reasons, or perhaps the fundamental reason that I've been unable to like really commit to these women and these relationships, I wonder if it's a problem with monogamy. I'm wondering if there's this resistance to being monogamous. And so I'm a scientist. I think like a scientist, and I'm like, well, let me explore this possibility and see what's out there and do some reading and do some research. So I started doing some reading, doing some research, having conversations. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I feel like I have enough understanding of how this might work. Try it. And then I began a series of relationships with three different, like really important relationships on this path, where I was really open about, hey, this is something I'm interested in.
You meet something you're interested in, and you
Yeah.
basically go straight up, I'm just letting you know, I'm more interested in an open relationship. So I'm like, you describe these. How did you think about it? Or this is trial and error. You had to go through a few iterations before you got to your optimal, let's say. So what did you start off with?
Precisely. So at first I was terrified, right? Because I'm like, oh my God, I have to have this conversation with somebody up front. I'm like so afraid of being judged or perceived as, I don't know, whatever it is, And I remember having this first conversation being like, hey, this is something I'm interested in. I've been thinking about this. I've been reading. This is like, reading these books, and like, here's a book if you're interested. And you want to like read about it. Like, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I want to try. And it was really amazing. It was really amazing because I thought that I was just going to encounter like so much negativity and women just being like, fuck you, no way, right?
Please back.
And I was surprised that it was probably about 50% of women were like, no thanks. And the other 50% were either like, oh, I'm curious about that, like interesting, like let's look at that. Or even, oh, I just came out of an open relationship, and it was like way more prevalent and sort of accepted than I thought it was going to be. And so the first the first iteration
What were the rules of the first iteration?
was, so the first
A
iteration
framework, a
there,
framework,
so
rather.
each iteration I learned a lot about sort of, what needed to happen for this to function in sort of in a healthy way. But the first iteration was sort of no rules. It was just like, okay, let's try this.
You didn't really have explicit rules. You were like, let's just explore.
Let's just
Not well,
explore how
not
this.
very well
Let's
thought
explore
before
how
you
this might work.
started.
Yeah. And that sort of, we were pretty good at communicating things, but ultimately we never built a foundation of our relationship,
Right.
and so it became too destabilized, and so it just didn't work. And so my big takeaway from that first iteration was, wow, you really have to build a foundation of trust and respect, and there's no way this can work without
But you have
like
to develop the
mutual
primary
trust.
relationship first, basically.
In my experience, 100%. It's like you need to develop that foundation. Otherwise, it becomes too
So there's
destabilized
almost
and it
a
doesn't work.
monogamous period in the beginning to get to get the, like, let's say the foundations built, and then you can open it up.
Well, that was how it worked with that one. 4 iterations later with my long-term partner, who I
No,
think
but
we'll
wait,
probably
we're gonna
talk
go
about.
into
Yeah.
we're gonna go
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
phase.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to
Yeah.
ask you, just quick pause before you go into phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah.
With your friend who is dating the married guy,
Yeah.
okay, in that dynamic, what could she hope for in terms of in developing a relationship with him? What would be let's say the end state there? Like how far can you take it? Because he's married. So, like, unless they decide that can she be on equal footing with his wife? Like, where can it go? Because, like, my experience with people who are in relationships is that they ultimately always want to end up being, I think my assumption is, the primary. At some point they're going to want to be like, hey, I want my primary too.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, not to speak for them and their
Oh, no, I'm just saying in
experience,
general and
but
conceptually.
yeah. So my experience is also a little limited in that I haven't gotten or experienced sort of polyamorous relations that I know exist that function well.
Okay, so
Where I think there isn't.
where there's, like, let's say, deep emotional relationships with more than one.
Yeah, actually, I do know. I mean, I know people who are involved in some relationships like this, and it seems to function well. And there isn't like a scrambling to replace a partner or potentially be a new primary partner. I'm still on my journey of exploration, and I had, with my long-term partner that we will get to, I'm sure, we sort of ventured into this territory, and things got really interesting in that place, and
Okay.
also quite challenging. Yeah.
Right. So, okay, so
Yeah.
give us the second iteration. So that relationship fell over, and
Yeah.
then how did you improve? How 2.0? How did you?
Yeah. So 2.0, another great, and these were all great. It was like even that first one sort of ended in a way that was really positive. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. If you're really honest and open about these things, you can move through these emotional experiences and even breakups sort of with love and in this positive way, because you're not being manipulative or hiding anything. And so the second iteration, yeah, it was like, okay, let's build this foundation. And then I really understood how, once you have that foundation, how important being honest is, and the level of communication that's necessary, and the level of honesty that's necessary, not only with your partner but with yourself, right? About, okay, how am I feeling about this, and let me really get in touch with like my emotional field, and then start to understand what those feelings are, and then how do I begin to articulate those feelings to my partner in a way that's like non-reactionary, right?
So
And that
this taught you to be a better communicator? Are you saying?
I
Did
think
it
it
teach you to
a
be
bit
also be able to be able to better express yourself, like not just factually, but more from emotional what you're feeling? Is like,
emotional awareness. Yeah, emotional awareness, emotional intelligence.
can you give us
Um,
some examples of how that played out? I remember you telling me a story about, and I'm not sure in which iteration we're talking about. Talked
yeah.
about how you were able to express anger without being violent, physical, loud, etc. Was that in this iteration, or was that down the path?
I think that was probably down the road. I'm not sure which exact experience that was, but yeah, as an example, let's say I'm with my partner and my partner there's some attraction to another guy, and it's expressed, right? Maybe in some evening there's some new person, and
When you say that,
my
I'm just going to paint a picture here, give the visual. So you would be at a party, a cocktail party, a dinner party, or something like that with your partner. Okay. There would be another, individual there that she took a liking to in terms of, oh, he's very cute, or like, oh, he's got good chat, or whatever it may be. And during the evening, she's effectively flirting with him, engaging with him, and even showing her interest directly to him, that I'd really like to go
right,
to it.
right. So
If not tonight,
there's
maybe another time. And so
yeah, or
I want to know, and I think
yeah,
especially for the audience, because this is a very bizarre concept for most people.
yeah, yeah.
I want you to tell, I want you to explain, or maybe express, when that's happening, how are you feeling, and how do you rationalize how you're feeling, and how how are you okay with it? So
Yeah.
I want to, like, how, like, are you finding that a turn on that another guy's attracted to your partner? Are you like, does it excite you that to fantasize about your partner being with someone else, or do you actually sometimes get jealous and go, oh, you know, I don't know,
Sure.
if
Yeah.
do I really want to share her with others, or
Sure. Yeah. So I think the initial, and I think where most of my development happened was with a 6 year long partner that I had, where we were really deep exploring this stuff together over a long period of time, where we could really progress through, opening up different boundaries and incrementally sort of opening up to the point where at the end we were quite open and had other relationships with other partners. But yeah, so in that scenario, which certainly there were moments where she was, flirting with another guy, and yeah, the things that come up are insecurity, jealousy, and insecurity are the main sort of emotions that I would feel. Um, and
and how did you manage that?
yeah, and so the first step is really owning those feelings, right? So rather than being reactive and getting angry or saying, "Hey, I don't like the way you're talking to this guy," or whatever, whatever that
Can you
conversation
actually,
could be.
can you even actually say that?
So this would usually we would have an experience, and then afterwards we would sort of process.
Oh, that's
And
so.
I
Actually,
might
it's
say
like it's like you do it like
we do like a
a review,
totally, and we would
post
learn
mortem. How did that
we
play
would
out?
and we would learn so much. We would learn so much because at first we would have a lot of when we were starting we would have a lot of boundaries. And so then we would come up, maybe it was okay, I don't know what the boundary is, but like it's okay to flirt, let's say in this scenario. And then, maybe the next day it was like, okay, I was flirting with this guy and how did that feel? And so I knew
You
there
asked him, or she's asking, how'd you
she's
feel
asking
about me? flirting with a guy.
Yeah, or I say, "Hey, I saw you flirting with this guy, and it made me feel this way." And the first step was really like owning the way that I was feeling and not putting it on her, not being reactive and blaming her, saying, "Oh, you made me feel this way, right?
Mm.
It's your responsibility. I'm blaming you for this feeling that I had." I think step one was really owning my own sort of emotional emotional state and not blaming her for it or putting it on her, making her responsible for it. And I did that, I could say, okay, well, now I can, and having a safe space to communicate, hey, this is what I was feeling. I felt a little weird. I felt a little uncomfortable. Maybe I felt insecure. But moving from this sort of reactive type state to a more unreactive, right? A little removed, a little introspective. Where are these feelings coming from? And then being able to communicate them was actually like liberating. It was really liberating to be able to have these conversations and then to feel safe to go into sort of my own emotional world and then have my partner receive me without judgment, right? And then in that process, I might say, well, I've made me feel insecure, and then it was like, okay, well, why am I feeling insecure about this? Maybe I'm insecure that this guy's more attractive than me, or he's funnier than me, or whatever it is. And that would allow my partner to then respond with reassurance, right? I still love you. Like, you're amazing. Our relationship is so solid. And so that was sort of a great dialogue that could start to happen.
Is it balanced, or do you, in your experience up to now, is it sometimes your partner finds it more challenging, sometimes you find it more challenging? Or does it tend to skew towards the female struggles more with it than the male, or vice versa? Like, how would you, like, in your experience, we're talking about your own journey, what have you found? Have you found that there's been like it is a true understanding that you guys basically fluctuate within a band, something like that?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to make generalizations, right?
I'm saying
I
you.
had my experience. Yeah. I was surprised at how how much easier it was for me to have my partner be with other guys and have other experiences. It was much easier than I thought. I think I was able to start doing that processing much quicker than I thought I was going to be able to. And one of the concepts that was really helpful was this idea of compersion, which is essentially taking pleasure in someone else's pleasure or joy in someone else's joy. And so I was able to find this pathway from the jealousy and insecurity into the compersion. And so I might say, okay, well,
Do you think that's the key ingredient for a successful open relationship?
yeah, I think it's essential, right? It's totally essential. I think it's really challenging for some people, but for me, it came quite easily. For example, like the concept, when you meet somebody new and there's a spark, and there's this chemistry that happens, and maybe there's a first kiss, and that's like such an exciting experience, right?
Butterflies, excitement, the fairies, the
Yeah,
rainbows,
like
unicorns, all that stuff. Yeah.
what a wonderful experience that we get to have in life is having these connections with people where it's just so juicy and great. It's just such a great part of life. And I realized, like, and in my reading and in my experiences, I realized, like, wow, okay, if there's this partner that I really love, truly deeply love this person, and I want them to have their fullest life experience, right? like, why would I tell them they can never have that experience ever
Okay.
again in their life?
It's interesting, isn't
Right?
it? When you put it
Yeah.
like that,
You can
effectively
never have this. You can,
the monogamous contract effectively bans you. It's a lifetime ban on having, to getting to experience
whatever
that
these
first
experience.
those
Yeah.
first few weeks, months, or whatever in a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's so, those experiences are so beautiful and such great moments of connection with other humans and such great potential moments of intimacy. For me, like intimacy is just, it's such a beautiful thing to have with another human. And especially when it's, and then there's like physical intimacy and it's just yummy and juicy and
are you ever worried that in one of those episodes that your partner will fall madly in love with another and you'll be downgraded, permanently downgraded?
y-
Because
for sure,
that is the you
that's
are
the
always
that's the
you
one
are
of the big
always
fears, right?
living
Yeah.
on the edge.
Yeah, but I think I certainly would have those thoughts, and I think the realization is it doesn't matter if you're in an open relationship or a monogamous relationship.
That's going to happen anyway.
It's gonna happen anyway, right? I mean, maybe you open
Really?
the field, maybe you open the field to more opportunities for that to happen,
100%
right?
you are. Basically, the temptation, you're effectively putting the
But you're
temptation on the table and they're
but you're
allowing them to
effect
try the temptation.
100%, and effectively you're
A much higher
also
probability putting your science brain on. There's a
effectively
much
you're
higher
also
probability that your partner will find another because you have opened the doorway to allowing that.
and I think there's like a lesson in like non-attachment there too, right? It's
Okay.
like, well, if it's gonna happen, if I'm not the right person for my partner, and if they meet somebody else who is the right person, if I really truly love them, then I'm gonna want them to be happy and be with this person, right? If they want to leave and be in some monogamous relationship with them. The alternative scenario is they meet somebody, they have a connection, there's love there, and that doesn't change anything between her and I. We continue in our relationship, but now there's this new relationship and it's additive, right? And we had this experience where she was dating another guy, and to this day he's a great friend of mine. We've become super close, and it was additive to our experience and to our lives.
So you had a 6-year very deep relationship. Was marriage itself ever considered in that framework? Did you like how
Totally, totally, yeah,
you
totally. I
can
mean,
so being in an open relationship or polyamorous, you can still get married to your primary partner, correct? That's still is that something
yeah,
that
of
you
course.
still aspire? Like in someone who lives like that, do you still aspire to have one main primary relationship? Is that's still the goal?
So that's my goal now for sure. In that long-term relationship, the plan was to get married, and we talked about children and marriage. That was all the plan.
So you just
Yeah.
touched on starting a family, having children. How do you envisage that working, like for the kids? Like you're obviously not there yet in terms of managing a family in this dynamic yet. But do you know people who have a family and have this dynamic,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
how aware are the children of the parents' dynamic?
That married couple that was
Oh yeah,
where the
yeah,
guy was dating my friend. So they had two kids,
okay.
and I had actually ended up going on vacation with them later. We all became friends. We went on vacation with a group of people. The kids were there. At that moment in time, the kids were not aware. They were quite young. Kids were not aware of the dynamic. But I know that over the next few years, it was disclosed to the kids what was going on. Now that was their experience. I think for me,
Yes.
And what I had talked about with my partner at the time and the way we sort of understood things was that the relationship would breathe, right? It would sort of expand and contract.
Meaning there would be
And
periods of time where you went deeper into being more open, and there were times where you'd like contract and be just your own unit. Is that what you mean by that?
yeah, exactly. And I think we both had an understanding that if we were going to have kids, that there would be a moment, during pregnancy and sort of, these early childhood years that we would sort of, be more closed. And we weren't quite sure what it was going to
Sure.
look like, but that was the general sense
Principles.
was that, yeah, the general sense was that we would close in those moments. And we also had moments, we had a big moment where we closed our relationship for about 4 months because we had had a rupture. We had had a boundary that was broken and or crossed, and so we had to heal from that. And in that healing process, it was clear that we needed to close and have a closed container where we could do our healing. And so through that process, I was like, okay, I can see how over time something like this would expand and contract and breathe, and not be so rigid or prescriptive in how things were supposed to be, but let it sort of evolve the way
Can you give
it
us an
needed to evolve.
example of a broken boundary? Because a boundary is effectively a rules of engagement that we agree this is how things are going to play out. And a breach of a boundary, and you can just give an example of a breach of a boundary, is effectively
Yeah,
a
yeah.
breach in agreement or a breach of trust. That is, or it could be a miscommunication, but at the end of the day, it fundamentally becomes hey, we agreed on that and you took it one step further, and like, it's a trust issue, surely.
It's absolutely a trust issue. So the example that comes to mind, this was the first boundary that was crossed. There were a few, and also caveat, like really, really understanding that in this exploration, we kind of knew that there were going to
Mistakes will
be
get made
mistakes, right? And that we would have to learn from them and navigate some of these mistakes. And I think that's a big reframe
and be a little
from
tolerant, have a little bit of tolerance for that.
yeah, I think that's a big reframe from what I think we're traditionally taught, and what we see on TV and media. It's like if you have one transgression or if you cheat,
You're out. Red
it's
card.
over. It's over. Red card. And so this was like a really is pretty like amazing new paradigm to be in, where there was the ability to make a mistake and then to recover from that and actually learn and grow together from that. So the example is, at one point we had a boundary where if we were going to engage with another person, we would have to check in with each other to say, hey, this is potentially going to happen. How do you feel about it? Get consent and
Before it
consent, right? Consent and permission beforehand.
How do you do that? You're like in a situation.
Let me tell the story.
honey,
So we had,
like, it's really hot woman here, and I'm like, I'm
you're
vibing
stealing
her.
my line. You're stealing my lines.
Uh,
But the idea is you create these boundaries so that you feel safe, right? There's a safe container where you can explore some of you know, these challenging experiences, but with enough safety that you can go there. And so this was one of the boundaries. And there was one evening where I had gone home with another woman and had an experience and didn't check in.
a non-approved woman.
A non-approved, yeah, didn't check in. And yeah, and it was like we were in the moment, right? Just like you were saying, you're sort of in the moment, things unfolded. There wasn't a great opportunity to say, oh, hang on 1 second, let me call my girlfriend.
But you know, at that
But
time, you know that this is a non-negotiable. So like
Right.
you effectively in that point had to say, listen, this can happen, but I need to, I do have a partner and I just need to check in before this is going to happen.
But I didn't. But in the past, I had, right? I had a few experiences where I did that and it was like, okay, great, have fun. And then in this instance, I didn't. And in the basically first thing in the morning, I called my partner. I said, hey, this is what happened. And it was hard, right? Trust had been broken and there was a breach of contract essentially. But we had a number of conversations about it, and in the process of having those conversations, we realized it's sort of not really feasible to always check in before something's going to happen because you are in the moment and you want to sort of be in that flow and
yeah.
Yeah, that magical moment. And so at the end of that process, we said, well, let's lift that boundary and let's take that boundary away. So that was sort of how, part of
Okay.
how we would maneuver through this. And then other boundaries were like, oh, well, that definitely needs to be there, right? We bump up against this boundary and this really doesn't feel good. So that's, let's keep that boundary there. So you sort of start to figure out where your guardrails are.
Yeah. You're constantly just checking in and seeing where bound, and it's dynamic. It's not fixed forever. It's like, it's talking about how it feels. Maybe we can move that boundary a little bit more because it's like, it's a bit of a nothing burger or bring it in because, hey, that actually doesn't make me feel good. So I guess that's the rules of the game. Is the dynamic about separate experiences, or there are also experiences where you're bringing a third in for both of you, or that just depends on the interest of the couple?
So both. So in the beginning, in the first few years, I would say we really we progressed very slowly and incrementally and sort of methodically, saying, okay, let's see these boundaries, let's go up to the boundary, let's see how it feels. If it feels okay, let's push it further. And so at first it was experiences together. And then over the course
it starts off as experiences together, right?
At first it was experiences together. Yeah. Felt way more safe to start there. And then incrementally, as we pushed our boundaries further and further, it was like, okay, there's this moment where, you want to go on a date with somebody, and if this is a scary thing, but I want to let's explore this pushing this boundary there, and have you go on a date with somebody and have an experience where I'm not there. And
you're at home waiting for your partner to come home and feeling
and I remember a night
really shitty about yourself, going, why did I let her do that?
Definitely remember an evening like that where it was
like she's going out and you're like,
it was challenging. It was a little challenging.
She comes home and you're like, you need to hold me, darling.
Well, totally. And so that was really important for when we did have experiences apart, to coming back, understanding what the other person needed to sort of feel loved and safe again, and really making sure we hit those notes of giving my partner what they needed to feel safe again.
You ever feel guilty at all when you go off and have an experience that's without her? Do you feel, is there any emotion of guilt?
No guilt, because we were very good, at least in the we had some issues toward the end when we were really exploring some deep stuff where we were having other emotional relationships and things started to get more complicated. But for the most part, we would have conversations and there would be consent. It's like, no, I want, like, go have this experience. There's total consent there. And so me knowing that I had consent to be in this experience, I didn't feel guilty. It was great. It was liberating and lovely, and really it was full of love. There was a lot of love on all sides.
But let's fast forward to today. We're in 2025. May. Tell me, where is the doc at in terms of the relationship wise and framework wise? Where have you gotten to?
So that partner and I ended up uncoupling for our own reasons. We're still super tight, very close, a lot of love there. That was a few years ago. And now I'm in a pretty new relationship that's really wonderful. And we're still in like sort of this great honeymoon phase. We've known each other for a few years and have been friends. And it's been really wonderful to drop into this like great love bubble. And
Monogamous at this stage.
yeah, monogamous right now. And the general sense that I have is that I'm not rigid about what I want things to be like. Yeah, I
What
think it's
feels
really,
right for now, basically.
yeah, and I think every relationship is different and every person in each relationship is different. And so, we haven't been prescriptive of what's going to happen with us. And I'm just in a place where I'm like open to what unfolds and really just enjoying being in love and being in a new relationship right now and
Amazing.
and in that building foundation stage, which is really wonderful and great. So
And still intentions to want to have children, have a family, etc. This is not a dynamic that that shies away or it doesn't have aspirations for family. It's like they're that they can all be held in the same bubble.
yeah, yeah, certainly, I certainly want family and yeah, and partnership and primary partnership, 100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing you know, a real life journey of a journeyman who is, found himself in this wonderful world of, let's say, your tailor-made relationships. Because, like you said, there is no hard and fast rules or framework that everyone follows. It's more something that you learn along the way of what's going to work for you, and it's choose your own adventure as long as you have a consenting partner who wants to go on that same adventure with you with those with very clear understanding and I guess the stuff I really loved when when we spoke initially was that this type of setup actually forced you to become a much better communicator, number one. Number one.
Yeah.
And number two, and I think even more important, was it forced you to become very, very connected with yourself and made you be
Yeah.
very honest with yourself because it really challenged you in how you feel. And in doing so, the two together, being really, really honest and connected with yourself and the communicate, I think I certainly learned some tools from you in how to become a better communicator, even though I'm not always able to put into practice, the
I mean,
ability,
yeah.
like my favorite was the being able to express to your partner that in a very relaxed tone and very centered to be able to say to your partner that, hey, what you did made me feel really angry inside and really angry towards you, and being able to say that, I think very difficult to get to a point because usually when people are angry can be physical, they're gonna scream, they're gonna have a very irrational interaction. So being able to like really just like center yourself and be able to express yourself like that, I thought was can be highly effective, and also will most likely end up with the best or most desired outcome you could get, given that you're almost escalate or like with the other that they can't you can't get angry at that sort of expression of communication. You know, when someone's saying it to you like that, they can hardly respond by being physical or raising voices or whatever. When you're the one
Right.
who's feeling that anger and you're expressing it in the like the cleanest way possible.
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful because you had said, what you did made me feel this way, and I think that is a pitfall into that reactive state because that's also like a way of blaming, right? It's like you did this, so you made me feel this way.
How would you say it?
So I think for me, what I've learned to do is to not put the blame and not say you did this, right? You made me feel like this, but it's like, okay, I'm feeling this feeling and let me try to figure out why I'm feeling this feeling, and what are the sequence, what are the events or what transpired that made me feel this way without placing blame on the other person. And I think in doing that, there's this capability of avoiding that reactivity that can so often happen when you place blame, because then you immediately get this defensive response, right?
Well, that's
Well,
what I was
I
using.
didn't do this. I didn't do this. You did this,
Yeah,
right? And then it's the you did.
you're disarming the other.
Yeah. So that was a big tool I think that I'm still working on, but that I've begun to learn how to do a lot better than I can approach these conversations and some of these feelings in a calmer, less reactive way that then allows you to really engage in these interesting conversations about deep feelings and insecurities and whatever comes up there, fears.
So at the end of my show, I always ask 5 quick fire questions. I'm going to shoot away at you, Doc. Who would you like to say sorry to given the chance?
Yeah, so I thought about this one and
Can I guess?
you can guess, but yeah, go
Miss
ahead.
New York? Miss New York?
So I have apologized to her
Okay.
profusely in letters and in emails, and there's still maybe another, you know, revisiting of that. But the more I thought about it, the more that I realized the answer is that I want to apologize to myself, and I've over the years I've realized how high of a standard that I've held myself to, and really not allowing myself to, or wanting to allow myself to fail or make mistakes. And I'm just learning how to be able to make mistakes and learn and grow from them and see them as opportunities. But I didn't realize that for a long time, and I think I did myself a disservice and caused myself a significant amount of pain in the process.
What are you proud of being or doing in your life?
I think my curiosity and sort of adventurous spirit, and my willingness to sort of go out into some relatively unknown or new territory and try to learn something. It takes courage, and it's been scary, and I'm proud of myself for for challenging some of the norms and what's expected of us, not only in the sort of love realm, but other aspects of life as well.
When did you receive kindness while needing it most and expecting it least?
Certainly in those moments of boundary crossing, where in prior experiences in the old relationship models, with that one relationship that crashed and burned, and I never got that chance to communicate and sort of process. But in my relationship, my later relationship we've been talking about, to be able to make a mistake and then to be received with compassion and love and kindness and a willingness to discuss what happened and unpack and process was so healing. I mean, so healing to be able to have those experiences with my partner at that time. Like really, really total game changer to realize like what was possible in the world of communication and non-judgment.
What did your mother or father teach you that you frequently remind yourself of?
First thing, when I was young, everything in moderation. That was a big one. And then also just being a kind human. Just being a kind human.
And the final one is, what is the doc's superpower? Besides being a love machine?
That's the answer is I think just my heart and my capacity for love, I think is
I think I
pretty
feel,
awesome. And
I
yeah,
think I feel
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I'd say love. I'd say your heart plus love, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doc, what a pleasure.
Yeah, such a pleasure. Scratching the surface.
Totally.
It's so deep. This topic's so deep.
Oh, it
But
really
but
is.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think a lot of the audience is not very familiar. So
yeah.
it's even more interesting.
Well,
So-
I hope I did some justice
Oh, you
to the way that I think about this. Yeah.
You did great. So thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Men's Anonymous. Thank you for listening. For more information on the Men's Anonymous podcast, including resources discussed in the show, visit mensanonymous.com. Join us next time as host Daniel Weinberg provides a non-judgmental space for men to voice their innermost feelings and thoughts.